It started like any other ordinary school day. A bell ringing, children laughing, sneakers pounding against the blacktop as recess began. But within just 10 minutes, everything changed. One student, an 11-year-old fifth grader named Lucas Bennett, simply vanished. No one saw him run off. No one saw him leave the playground. One moment he was there, kicking a red rubber ball near the swings. The next, gone. What happened to him during those few mysterious minutes sent a ripple of fear through the entire school. And it wasn't until the custodian, an unassuming man named Mr. Haver, discovered something chilling under the old maintenance shed that the true story started to unfold. He found a hatch, a hidden, rust-covered metal door sunken into the ground where no one even thought to look before. It was padlocked from the outside. But here's the part that will keep you glued to this screen. When the lock was broken and the hatch was opened, what they found underneath rewrote everything the community thought they knew about their school and about each other. Now, before we dive into the dark truth of what happened, I want to talk directly to you. Yeah, you sitting there, watching this video, probably wondering if this is one of those stories that just leaves you hanging or ends with more questions than answers. I get it. You clicked on this video for one reason: to find out what really happened to the missing student and what was inside that secret hatch. And I'm telling you, stick with me through this story, and you're going to get the answer you came for. Not just the basic facts. You're going to hear the parts nobody talks about, the theories, the evidence, the emotions that tore through an entire community. I promise, by the time we reach the end, you'll understand why this story is so much bigger than one missing kid. It's about the unseen, the ignored, and the things we sometimes fail to notice when we're too focused on the surface. See, stories like this don't just affect the people involved. They mess with all of us in some way.
Why?
Because deep down, every one of us has that lingering fear. What if someone I care about disappeared without a trace? What if something dark was hiding right under our feet and we never even knew it? That's why this story is so haunting. It's not just about a boy who went missing. It's about the secrets our schools, our neighborhoods, even our closest communities can hide in plain sight. And whether you're a parent, a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to understand the truth behind the headlines, this is one of those stories that hits on a deeply human level. It makes you question how well you really know the world around you. Lucas wasn't just another kid. He was the kind of student who stuck to himself, but not in a way that raised red flags. He was creative, loved to draw, and had this quiet curiosity that made his teachers say he was thinking about something bigger. He wasn't the loudest in class, but he noticed things others didn't. And that matters, because as this story unfolds, you're going to find out that Lucas might have seen something. Something he shouldn't have. The way his classmates described that day makes your skin crawl. He was just gone. No shouting. No struggle. No sign of him climbing a fence or leaving school grounds. But somehow, he disappeared during the 30-minute recess window, and no security camera, teacher, or classmate saw how. That's what made the school call 911. That's what made the town panic. And that's what made Mr. Haver, the custodian who's worked there for 22 years, remember a spot behind the building most people had forgotten even existed. There's something about the way Mr. Haver tells the story that gives you chills. He's not a dramatic guy. He's quiet, methodical. He shows up early, leaves late, and knows every bolt and pipe in that school. So when he says he never noticed the hatch before that day, you believe him. It was hidden under a patch of dying grass, right next to a tool shed that hadn't been opened in years. He said he tripped over something and heard a metallic clank under his boot. That's when he looked closer and found the edges of a hatch that had been buried beneath years of overgrowth and dirt. It wasn't on any blueprint. The principal didn't even know it existed. But it was there, locked tight, with a heavy rusted latch that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The school was evacuated. Police were called. A crowbar was used. And when they cracked that hatch open, what they saw down there was so bizarre, so unexpected, it froze the officers in place. Here's where I need you to really focus, because from this point on, everything you thought you knew about school safety, missing children cases, and old buildings is about to be flipped upside down. This story is filled with twists that will mess with your head and details that might make you pause the video just to process what you're hearing. And I'm not just here to tell you what happened. I'm here to take you inside the investigation, to show you what officials uncovered step by step and the unbelievable theories that started floating around. We're talking secret passageways, decades-old cover-ups, strange symbols found underground, and testimony from a teacher who claims she saw Lucas after he vanished. You won't believe who else gets pulled into the story. It's not just the school staff or the police. The FBI eventually steps in. Parents start coming forward with stories from the past. And then there's the sketchbook, a notebook that belonged to Lucas, filled with drawings that seem innocent at first, until you realize they match patterns found deep under the school. And no one knows how he could have seen them. There are too many threads for this to be coincidence. That's why the mystery of what happened during recess isn't just a mystery anymore. It's something much more disturbing. Something bigger. And as the investigation unfolds, it all begins to point in one direction. That hatch was never meant to be found. So now the question is, what was it hiding all those years? And how did an 11-year-old boy uncover its secret before anyone else did? Just days before Lucas Bennett disappeared, things at Willow Creek Elementary seemed completely normal, or at least, that's what people kept telling themselves afterward. But when investigators started pulling apart the days leading up to his vanishing, they found more questions than answers. Lucas had been acting different. Not in a dramatic, cry-for-help kind of way, but quieter, more distracted. Teachers noticed it. His art teacher, Ms. Jennings, said he stopped turning in assignments he normally enjoyed. He'd just sit there, staring at his paper, doodling the same abstract patterns over and over again. Tight spirals, intersecting lines, strange door-like symbols that she thought were just creative flair. But when police later compared those drawings to what was carved into the walls beneath the hatch, the similarities were impossible to ignore. How would an 11-year-old boy know what those symbols looked like if he'd never been down there? That's what started fueling the darker theories, the ones people in town don't like to say out loud. At home, Lucas's parents said he'd been having trouble sleeping. He told them he kept hearing things, scratching noises in the walls, whispers coming from the floor vent near his bed. His mom thought it was just an overactive imagination. Kids get scared. They dream things. But Lucas wasn't the kind of kid who cried wolf. He was rational, thoughtful. He'd always had this way of seeing things more clearly than most kids his age. That's why his parents brushed it off until it was too late. The night before he vanished, Lucas asked his dad a strange question. If something's buried under a school, does that mean it was supposed to stay buried? His father thought it was about a history project. But now, every word feels loaded. Like Lucas knew something was coming. As investigators dug into the case, they found themselves hitting a wall. There were no signs of abduction. No strangers caught on camera. Nothing in the footage from the schoolyard that showed Lucas leaving. But then they discovered something unexpected. He wasn't entirely alone before he disappeared. Two students claimed they saw Lucas walking toward the edge of the field near the storage shed, talking to someone. One of the kids swore it was a teacher. The other said it was someone tall in a green jacket. But here's the problem. No teacher wore green that day. No staff member matched that description. When the school ran a full audit of who was signed in, everyone was accounted for. So, who was Lucas talking to? That's when suspicion began to spread. And in small towns like Willow Creek, it spreads fast. Some parents pointed fingers at the janitor, Mr. Haver, despite him being the one who found the hatch. They said it was too convenient. That he'd worked there so long, he probably knew things no one else did. He was the only one with keys to certain areas of the building. He knew how to shut off the security cameras temporarily. But then others jumped to his defense, saying he was a good man who dedicated half his life to keeping the school safe. Still, people couldn't ignore the coincidence. He was the one who found the hatch, and he just so happened to trip over it. After 22 years? Then attention turned to Ms. Jennings. She had spent more time with Lucas than most of his other teachers, and admitted under questioning that Lucas had confided in her. He once told her he thought the school was built on something it shouldn't be. At the time, she laughed it off. thought it was his creative mind going into overdrive again. But when asked why she never reported it, her answer seemed shaky. That's when they found something odd, an old yearbook photo from 1997 showing a younger Ms. Jennings standing near the same spot where the hatch was uncovered. Back then, it was a garden now long gone. Was it possible she had known something about what was there? She denied it, of course. But when stories don't add up, people start filling in the gaps. Another twist came when police searched Lucas's locker. Inside, they found a crumpled page torn from a library book, an old town planning document with faded ink and hand-drawn floor plans. On the back, Lucas had scribbled the words, "Not a basement, a trap." No one knows where he got that phrase, but it echoed a local urban legend, one about the school being built over a Prohibition-era tunnel system used for smuggling. The story had always been treated like playground gossip, something kids dared each other to explore during Halloween. But when authorities matched the layout of Lucas's sketch to the underground chamber below the hatch, the legend didn't seem so far-fetched. Was it just a coincidence? Or did Lucas discover something real hidden beneath the foundation of the school? Red herrings started popping up everywhere. A former maintenance worker named Dennis Clay came forward, saying he once saw blueprints that included sublevel rooms, but they were scrubbed from the official documents before a renovation in 2003. When asked who removed them, he named a retired school board member who passed away years ago. And just like that, the trail hit another dead end. But the idea stuck. Someone, somewhere, had tried to erase parts of the school's history. And maybe Lucas had stumbled onto that buried past. As rumors spiraled, more people from the community came forward with eerie stories. Strange noises coming from under the building, cold spots in the west hallway, classroom lights flickering for no reason. One former teacher said she left the school years ago because she felt watched during her after-hours grading sessions. Suddenly, the idea of a haunted school didn't sound like just kids trying to scare each other. But others believed something even darker might be at play. Something intentional. Something human. So where does that leave us? A missing boy who might have uncovered a hidden part of the school. A mysterious hatch that was sealed shut for decades. Drawings that predicted what was beneath it. Witnesses who gave conflicting accounts. And a trail of strange symbols and forgotten blueprints that suggest this wasn't just a random disappearance. Someone knew about the hatch. Someone wanted it, kept quiet. And Lucas Bennett, curious and clever as he was, may have paid the price for getting too close to the truth. But this is just the beginning. Because what the search team found inside that underground chamber the moment they descended the hatch, that's where the story truly begins to unravel. And once I tell you what they discovered, you'll start to question whether this was ever about one missing student, or if Lucas was just the first clue in something far more sinister. The morning after the hatch was opened, the school went into lockdown. No students were allowed back inside, and the district brought in outside investigators to assess the area beneath the building. What they found only deepened the mystery. Beneath the rusted door was a narrow stairwell, descending into a space no one had seen in decades. Low ceilings, damp walls, and a single corridor that led to a bricked-off room. The walls were lined with decades-old graffiti, strange markings, and even fragments of what looked like children's belongings, shoelaces, buttons, a dusty crayon box. Most of it was decayed beyond recognition. But then they found something that turned the investigation on its head. Lucas's sketchbook, the same one reported missing from his backpack just days before he vanished. It was propped up neatly on a wooden crate, its pages open to the same spiral patterns he'd drawn in class. The eerie part? No one could explain how it got there. The area had been sealed for years. No way in, no way out. And the padlock on the hatch had shown no signs of being tampered with, except by the officers who opened it the day before. As news spread, local media latched onto the story with headlines like "Secret Tunnel Found Beneath Elementary School" and "Missing Boy May Have Discovered Hidden Facility." Conspiracy theories started to swirl online. Some claimed it was a forgotten fallout shelter from the Cold War, others said it was tied to cult activity, even human trafficking. But the police weren't confirming anything. And that's when something strange happened. Just as momentum was building, the investigation hit a brick wall. One of the officers leading the search, Detective Ramos, abruptly stepped down from the case. No press conference. No explanation. One day he was leading the charge, the next he was gone. When a reporter tried to contact him, she was told he had taken personal leave. Then the real bombshell dropped. The evidence locker containing Lucas's sketchbook and several objects pulled from the chamber was broken into. Security footage for that night? Wiped. No backup. Just static. Every piece of physical evidence tied to the underground chamber had vanished. Around that time, Lucas's best friend, a kid named Ethan Morris, came forward with something he'd been too scared to say earlier. He said Lucas had confided in him 2 weeks before he disappeared, claiming he'd been followed after school. Not by a stranger, but by someone who worked at the school. Ethan wouldn't say who at first. Said he was afraid. But after pressure from investigators and parents, he finally gave a name. Mr. Trainer, the school counselor. A man everyone liked. Calm, patient, always the one organizing anti-bullying events and checking in on students having a hard time. It didn't make sense. No one could imagine him doing anything wrong. But when authorities tried to question him, they discovered he'd abruptly resigned 2 days after Lucas vanished. He left town, left no forwarding address. His phone disconnected. Social media accounts gone. It was like he'd vanished too. With the only physical evidence missing and the most promising suspect gone without a trace, investigators had to rely on what little they could piece together. That's when they started looking deeper into school records, personnel files, maintenance logs, blueprints. And they found something that hadn't been disclosed to the public. This wasn't the first time a student had gone missing at Willow Creek. In 1989, a third grader named Amy Wells disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Her case had been marked as a presumed runaway, though no body was ever found. The similarities were unsettling. She was last seen near the western wing of the school, not far from where the hatch had been discovered. Her file was buried in old archives, forgotten, or maybe deliberately hidden. When local reporters asked the school board about it, they denied any connection between the cases. But the timing, the location, and the lack of answers suggested otherwise. At the same time, a retired teacher reached out anonymously to the local paper, claiming there was a reason the hatch hadn't been listed on any official blueprint. According to her, during a construction expansion in the early 2000s, several underground areas were quietly sealed off without proper documentation. She recalled seeing men in unmarked trucks and workers who didn't speak with the usual school contractors. When she asked what they were doing, she was told it was above her pay grade. She didn't press the issue at the time, but after seeing the news about Lucas, she felt compelled to speak. Still, she refused to give her name or go on record, afraid of what might happen if she did. Meanwhile, Lucas's parents began receiving anonymous letters. No return address, no handwriting, just typed lines that said things like, "Some secrets are meant to stay buried," and he was too close to the truth. At first, police thought it was a hoax, someone messing with the family during a vulnerable time. But the tone of the letters was specific. Chilling. They referenced details about Lucas's routines and fears that hadn't been made public. That's when it became clear. Someone was watching. Someone didn't want the truth getting out. And someone was still out there. As the tension in the community reached a boiling point, Ethan, the boy who first spoke up, began withdrawing. He stopped going to school, stopped talking to friends. His parents claimed he was having nightmares, waking up screaming about being trapped underground. When they tried to get him help, he refused to speak to any counselor. He kept repeating the same phrase. "They told me not to talk." Who they were, he never said. But one night, Ethan snuck out of his house and left a note behind. All it said was, "I'm sorry. I have to find him." His bike was found the next morning, abandoned near the woods behind the school. And that's where things took a horrifying turn. Because right where Ethan's tire tracks ended, near a patch of overgrown shrubs, investigators found something buried under a tarp. Something they were never supposed to find. But what exactly did they uncover? That answer is more terrifying than anything anyone could have imagined. Beneath the tarp, half buried in a shallow grave behind the school, wasn't a person like many feared, but what they found was just as chilling. It was a rusted metal lockbox, sealed shut with a strange wax insignia stamped over the latch, an unrecognizable symbol almost identical to what Lucas had drawn repeatedly in his sketchbook. Inside the box was a bundle of documents so decayed that some disintegrated at the touch, but others, weathered and yellowed, were still readable. They weren't official files or school records. They looked more like personal journals, written in hurried, frantic handwriting, pages filled with paranoia and warnings. The author? Amy Wells's father. His name had never come up during the original investigation. According to archived news reports from 1989, he had suffered a mental breakdown shortly after his daughter disappeared and was eventually institutionalized. The town had quietly buried that part of the story. But these papers revealed something far more disturbing. He believed Amy had uncovered a secret inside the school and that someone had taken her to keep it quiet. He claimed she was convinced there were rooms beneath the building that didn't exist on any blueprint and that voices had called to her from the West Wing, voices that promised answers. In his last entry, dated just days before he vanished himself, he wrote, "The walls aren't just hiding something, they're something." The discovery should have shifted the case, but instead, it only created more questions. How did the lockbox end up in the exact place where Ethan disappeared? Had he found it, or had someone left it there for him to find? Or worse, was someone trying to make sure it was found, to send a message? And who had sealed it with that wax symbol that matched Lucas's drawings decades later? It didn't make sense. Lucas couldn't have known about Amy. No one had mentioned her name until now. Yet somehow, their stories were becoming entangled, as if they were following the same invisible thread. At that point, the entire town was teetering on the edge of hysteria. Parents were pulling their kids out of school, the district was facing a legal storm, and reporters swarmed Willow Creek, hungry for more footage, more interviews, more fear to feed their headlines. But the most unsettling development came when another person stepped forward. Rachel Bennett, Lucas's older sister. She'd been away at college during the initial disappearance, but after the media circus exploded, she returned home to support her parents. And that's when she received her own message. Unlike the typed, impersonal threats her parents got, Rachel's came as a small box placed on the hood of her car. Inside was one of Lucas's favorite toys, an action figure he never went anywhere without, now charred and partially melted. Beneath it was a note, handwritten this time, in shaky but deliberate script. "You were warned. Leave it alone." Rachel immediately went to the police, but they couldn't trace where the box came from. No prints. No witnesses. No security footage. It was as if whoever left it knew exactly how to avoid detection. But what disturbed Rachel even more was what she remembered about the toy itself. Lucas had lost it months before he disappeared. He'd been devastated. She'd even helped him search for it around the house, and eventually convinced him it was gone for good. So how did it reappear now, burned and disfigured, delivered with a message only she would understand? Then came another contradiction. An investigative podcast host named Tyler Griggs, known for covering dark unsolved mysteries and trending cold cases, dug up archived blueprints of Willow Creek Elementary and found that the school had been built on land once owned by the Whitby Institute, a short-lived experimental boarding facility from the 1940s. There were barely any public records on the institute, but what little he found pointed to a controversial program focused on sensory deprivation, mental conditioning, and cognitive reprogramming of children labeled as unfit or challenging. It was shut down after only 3 years due to ethical violations, but there was no official investigation or accountability. What's more, the institute's former property lines overlapped almost exactly with the current school grounds, including the area where the hatch had been found. Was the underground space an old lab or holding area? Had it been covered up and rebranded as a school? And if so, by whom? Tyler's podcast episode featuring the Whitby revelation went viral, hitting the YouTube trending tab and pulling national attention toward the case. That's when the pushback began. Tyler reported that someone had attempted to hack his files. Then his podcast's main server crashed without warning. His producer received anonymous texts telling them to stop spreading lies. They thought it was just internet trolls, until Tyler was followed while walking to his car after a speaking event. The footage from the venue's parking lot showed a tall figure in a green jacket lingering by the vehicle, the same detail given by the child witness who saw Lucas speaking to someone near the field. It was impossible to see the person's face, but the resemblance was enough to reignite the theory that the figure had been real, and perhaps still very close. As these layers of mystery piled up, trust in the investigation completely eroded. The original lead detective had vanished. Witnesses were going silent. Evidence kept disappearing or being discredited. Even Rachel began doubting who she could turn to. One of Lucas's teachers, Mr. Holbrook, a quiet, soft-spoken man who had always defended Lucas's behavior, reached out to Rachel privately and claimed he had something to show her. He wouldn't say what, only that he found it in an old faculty storage room that hadn't been used in years. But when Rachel arrived at the agreed meeting spot, he never showed. The next morning, Mr. Holbrook called in sick and was never seen at the school again. When district officials tried to reach him, his phone number was disconnected and his apartment had been cleared out, completely empty, as if he'd never lived there. The deeper Rachel dug, the more she felt surrounded by shadows, half-truths, erased records, vanished people, and objects that shouldn't exist anymore. But there was one clue. One final breadcrumb left behind in the last entry of her brother's sketchbook, a page that police had somehow missed or ignored. It didn't have spirals or symbols, just a single phrase written in large, careful block letters. The door isn't what you think. And that's where everything takes a turn. Because the real mystery might not be about where Lucas went, but what he discovered before he disappeared. And if he was right, then everything they believed about the school, the town, and even the people trying to help might be a lie. Rachel had always considered herself level-headed, analytical, even. As a psychology major, she'd studied the way fear distorts perception, how trauma can make even the most rational mind spiral. But nothing in her textbooks had prepared her for the relentless unease that had begun to seep into her every waking moment. It started with subtle things. She'd notice her bedroom light flickering at odd hours, even though the wiring in her childhood home had never been an issue before. Then there was the unmistakable sound of footsteps just outside her window at night. Once or twice, she'd convinced herself it was a raccoon or a stray dog. But then, early one morning just before dawn, she caught a glimpse, just a flash, of someone standing beneath the street lamp across from her driveway. The figure didn't move, didn't run. It simply stood there for almost a full minute before walking calmly out of view, swallowed by the fog. She didn't sleep that night, or the night after. She tried to rationalize it, told herself it could be a neighbor, someone walking their dog early. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just a stranger. It was a message, a warning. Someone was watching, and it wasn't random. The figure's silhouette had seemed familiar in an eerie, distant way. She began replaying everything in her head: Lucas's disappearance, the burned toy, the messages, the discovery of Amy Wells's father's notes. It was all connected, but the more she thought about it, the more she began to question her own memories. Had Lucas ever truly seemed like a normal kid? Had his drawings just been innocent doodles, or had he been trying to show them something all along? Rachel became paranoid. She'd check her rear-view mirror constantly, sure she was being followed. A silver sedan seemed to show up wherever she went, parked 2 cars away at the grocery store, idling near the campus lot when she returned to her old university for records. The license plate changed once, then again, but the vehicle was always the same make, the same model. When she tried to take photos, her phone would glitch out, as if something was interfering with the camera. She went to the police twice, filed a report, even showed them the sketchbook and the wax-sealed box, but they told her there was no evidence of a crime. "Keep your doors locked, Ms. Bennett. Stay aware of your surroundings." That was all they said. But she was already beyond that. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, Ethan's mother reached out. Her voice trembled over the phone, barely audible. She said Ethan had been found. Not by police, but by a hiker in the next county, wandering barefoot along a deserted trail just before nightfall. He was dazed, his clothes torn and filthy, covered in scrapes. He couldn't speak, couldn't even recognize his own mother. Doctors diagnosed it as a fugue state, a rare psychological condition often caused by extreme trauma. But Rachel didn't buy it. Not after everything. And especially not after what the hospital nurse confided in her during a whispered conversation in the hallway. She said Ethan had been clutching something when they brought him in, clinging to it with such force they had to sedate him to pry it from his fingers. It was a small black stone, smooth on one side, but carved with the exact same symbol from the hatch, from Lucas's sketchbook, from the wax seal on the lockbox. Rachel wasn't just afraid anymore. She was consumed. She started isolating herself, stopped answering texts from friends, barely ate. Her walls were now pinned with maps, photos, dates, all red yarn and pushpins, like some cliché detective in a thriller. But it wasn't a game to her. This wasn't fiction. People were disappearing. Facts were being erased. And she was now at the center of something she couldn't explain or escape. Her parents tried to intervene, told her she needed to step away, take a break, maybe even talk to someone. But when she returned home one night, her parents gone for the weekend, she found the front door slightly ajar. Nothing had been stolen. No signs of forced entry. But someone had been inside. She could feel it. The air was wrong. And then she saw it, on her kitchen counter, placed neatly next to the coffee machine. A photo. One she'd never seen before. It was of Lucas. Not the smiling, energetic version she remembered, but one that looked older somehow. His face was thinner, hollow-eyed, and the background was dark. No visible windows, just a cinderblock wall behind him. His expression wasn't fearful, but resigned, like someone who knew no one was coming. Written in red marker across the bottom were 4 words. He opened the door. Rachel's legs gave out. She sat on the kitchen floor for what felt like hours, shaking, staring at the photo as her brain fought to understand what it meant. Was it recent? Faked? Could it even be real? Or worse, was it proof that Lucas was still alive, being held somewhere underground, in the very place no one wanted to acknowledge existed? She thought she'd hit the edge of fear. But this was a different level. Because now she wasn't just being warned. She was being pulled in, drawn towards something ancient, buried, and calculated. And if that photo was real, then whatever had taken Lucas wasn't finished yet. As she sat there, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Her phone buzzed once, a text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You're next if you don't stop." That's when Rachel knew this wasn't just about Lucas anymore. It was about her. And she was already in too deep to walk away. But the real question now wasn't whether she would find the truth. It was whether she'd survive it. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The photo of Lucas with that chilling phrase scrawled across the bottom, "He opened the door," haunted her every time she blinked. She kept staring at it, dissecting every detail, trying to figure out if it was doctored or if the background gave away any clues. The texture of the wall behind him looked familiar, almost identical to the underground crawlspace she'd seen in grainy footage from Tyler Griggs's podcast. That connection alone was enough to make her pulse pound harder. But it wasn't until sunrise, when the soft orange light filtered through the window and cast shadows across the photo, that she noticed it. Something she'd overlooked. In the bottom left corner, partly obscured by a smear of dirt or ash, there was a reflection. It was faint but clear enough to recognize, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. She knew those glasses. They belonged to someone she trusted completely, someone who had been with her through every step of this unraveling nightmare. It was Principal Harris. Rachel's chest tightened as memories flooded back. How Harris had comforted her parents after Lucas vanished, how he gave tearful interviews to reporters, blaming the school's outdated security systems and promising reforms. He'd even sat with Rachel during a memorial service, placing a hand on her shoulder as she cried. He wasn't just a school administrator. He was a family friend, a former teacher of hers, practically an uncle. And yet, there were things that suddenly didn't add up. When the hatch was discovered, He was the first one to show up and insist that law enforcement seal it off. He claimed it was for safety reasons, but he also made sure no one, not even district maintenance crews, could access it afterward. And when the sketchbook page with the phrase, "The door isn't what you think," was recovered, he was standing in the room. Rachel remembered his face going pale, his lips tightening, but he said nothing. Just walked away. Determined to confront him, Rachel drove to the school that same morning. The parking lot was empty except for his car. She found him in his office, staring out the window, like he'd been expecting her. His expression didn't change when she slammed the photo down on his desk. He looked at it for a long time, then met her eyes. "I hoped you wouldn't find that," he said softly. And then, without prompting, he told her everything. Years ago, long before he became principal, Harris had been a student teacher during the school's expansion in the early 90s. Back then, contractors discovered a sealed basement chamber beneath what would become the West Wing. It wasn't part of any blueprint, and the original construction company quickly scrubbed the discovery, saying it was an error left over from a previous structure on the land. Harris had wandered into it during one of the inspection tours, and what he saw changed him. The chamber wasn't empty. It was lined with old desks, broken toys, and names carved into the walls. But more disturbing than that was what he heard. A voice. Not a sound, not an echo, but a voice, calm and curious, whispering his name though no one else was present. He left that day shaken and never returned to the chamber. But from that moment on, he said, he felt bound to the place, as if something in that room knew him and wouldn't let go. It wasn't long after that Amy Wells disappeared. According to Harris, Amy had come to him weeks before her disappearance, terrified. She said she'd found something beneath the tiles in one of the janitor's closets. A door, sealed, but humming. She begged him to help her open it. He refused, and a week later, she was gone. That's when he realized the truth. Whatever was underneath the school wasn't just buried, it was waiting. And it was clever. It didn't take people randomly. It called to them, used what they feared or loved or needed most. He said Lucas must have found the same door Amy had. He opened it, Harris said quietly, echoing the words in the photo. "Just like I almost did." Rachel didn't believe him at first. It sounded like delusion, folklore, some desperate rationalization for years of guilt. But then he opened his desk drawer and handed her a second photo, one that had never been seen by the public. It was taken from a school surveillance camera, dated 2 days before Lucas vanished. In the grainy image, Lucas stands alone in the west hallway, staring straight into the lens. But it's not his expression that chilled her. It's what's behind him. A tall, thin shadow stretching up the wall, a human figure without any visible features, standing impossibly close, with no logical source. That was the moment everything turned. Rachel realized this wasn't just about a missing kid or a flawed investigation. The truth was older, deeper. Something beneath that school was awake, and it was choosing who to reach. But what shattered her trust entirely was what Harris said next. "You need to stop looking," he told her, voice cracking. "Because it's already seen you, Rachel. And once it sees you, you belong to it." The photo, the stone, the messages, the hatch. All of it. Breadcrumbs not just from a mystery, but from a presence that manipulated events like a puppet master. Lucas didn't stumble upon anything. He was drawn, lured. And Rachel is now standing in the same place, with the same mark over her, and no clear way out. That was the moment everything turned. Rachel realized this wasn't just about a missing kid or a flawed investigation. The truth was older, deeper. Something beneath that school was awake, and it was choosing who to reach. But what shattered her trust entirely was what Harris said next. "You need to stop looking," he told her, voice cracking. "Because it's already seen you, Rachel. And once it sees you, you belong to it." The photo, the stone, the messages, the hatch. All of it. Breadcrumbs not just from a mystery, but from a presence that manipulated events like a puppet master. Lucas didn't stumble upon anything. He was drawn, lured. And Rachel was now standing in the same place, with the same mark over her and no clear way out. But before she could ask more, Harris abruptly stood and walked out of his office, leaving the photo behind. She called after him, but he didn't respond. She watched from the hallway as he walked through the building like a man on a mission, calm, collected, and purposeful. An hour later, his car was found abandoned on the edge of town.
No one has seen him since.
And just like that, someone else vanished. Now, Rachel wasn't sure what was real anymore, who to trust, or whether the mystery was ever meant to be solved at all. Because maybe the real secret of Willow Creek wasn't about finding answers, but surviving long enough to ask the right questions. Rachel barely made it home that night. Her hands trembled the entire drive. The image of Principal Harris's face, calm, almost relieved, burned into her mind. He had known something dark for years and done nothing to stop it. Now he was gone, like the others. The town's silence wasn't just complicity, it was survival. She realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't a mystery people were trying to solve. It was one they were desperately trying to bury. As soon as she stepped inside her front door, she locked it, shut all the blinds, and double-checked every room. Her heartbeat thudded like a drum in her ears. The air in the house felt heavier now, like it carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a message from her older brother, Aaron, the one person she trusted completely. "Come over.
I found something you need to see."
"Don't tell anyone." Her stomach flipped. She hadn't told Aaron much, only that she was looking into Lucas's disappearance again, that there were things the school never explained. He'd been away most of the time, working a high-security job in state government, always secretive about the details. But he was her brother, her protector, since they were kids. If anyone could help her, it was him. She grabbed the photo from Harris's office, stuffed it in her backpack, and drove across town to his apartment, a place he rarely invited anyone to. When she arrived, the curtains were drawn, lights dimmed. He met her at the door, eyes red, like he hadn't slept in days. His hand shook as he locked the door behind her. He didn't say much, just led her to his desk and played a clip from an encrypted folder on his laptop. It was surveillance footage, government-grade, time-stamped with internal tags. At first, it looked like an empty school hallway, the same west wing of Willow Creek Elementary. But then, as the seconds passed, a blur moved across the frame. The camera flickered. For a brief instant, the image stabilized, and Rachel saw a figure, tall, gray-skinned, almost human, but not quite, peering through a door that hadn't existed in the original layout of the building. Then it vanished and the file ended. Her breath caught in her throat. Aaron stared at her, and what he said next shattered whatever was left of her sense of safety. "I've seen that thing before, Ratch," he whispered. "Years ago. Before Lucas. Before any of this hit the news. They knew something was under that school back when I worked for the state.
There was a sealed file. Buried."
It wasn't just one kid. There've been others. They made it disappear. They erased the parents, changed names, everything. It goes back decades. Rachel felt her world tip sideways. She looked around the apartment, suddenly unsure if she was really safe, if there were cameras, if someone had followed her there. Aaron took a deep breath, then pulled out a folder. Thick, stamped confidential, with a faded government insignia. Inside were incident reports, old interview transcripts, photos of children who'd vanished long before Lucas. Some pages had redacted names, but others had handwritten notes, circled words. Hatch. Whispers. Door activation event. "I wasn't supposed to keep this," Aaron said. "But I knew someday someone would need it. Someone who could finish what others were too afraid to." Rachel's throat was dry. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" His answer crushed her. "Because you're on their list now." That was when Rachel realized the impossible choice she was facing. Aaron told her there was still time to disappear. She could vanish, cut ties with everything, start over with a new name. He had the resources, the contacts, and the knowledge to make it happen. But it meant leaving everything behind. Her parents, her friends, even her own identity. It meant Lucas would remain lost, the hatch sealed forever, and the children who were never reported would stay ghosts in an unmarked history. Aaron begged her not to go back. He said that once she crossed a certain line, they wouldn't just watch her, they'd silence her, like they had others. Rachel sat on his couch for hours, staring at the folder in her lap. Her mind raced through every possibility, every memory of Lucas. The way he laughed, the way he used to draw monsters that seemed too real. She remembered the strange games they used to play as kids, where they'd pretend the school had secret tunnels. Maybe it wasn't just imagination. Maybe the games had been something he knew but couldn't explain. The thought broke her. Aaron gave her a burner phone and an address in another state, a safe house. He said she had until sunrise to decide. If she stayed and kept digging, she'd be doing it alone. He couldn't protect her. Not anymore. That night, Rachel sat in her car outside their old elementary school. The lights inside were off, but she knew she wasn't alone. She could feel it. Something beneath the earth stirred, a low vibration in her bones, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to any living thing. The conflict inside her twisted tighter. Walk away and survive, or stay and uncover the truth that might destroy her. But just as she started the engine, her phone buzzed again. A message. No number. Just 5 words. Don't trust your brother. Run. She froze. Her blood turned to ice. Because now she didn't know who the real enemy was. Rachel didn't go to the safe house. She couldn't. Not after that last message. She didn't sleep, didn't call anyone. She spent the entire night pacing the motel room floor, going over every conversation, every glance, every half-truth from Aaron. Her brother, her protector, had been the only person she thought she could still trust. And now, even he was under suspicion. The message had shaken her, not just because of what it said, but because deep down it made sense. He knew too much. He'd always kept her just far enough from the truth to protect her, but maybe that wasn't his goal. Maybe protection had never been the point. Maybe control was. The folder he gave her had been real, but how long had he been holding on to it? Why now? Why give it to her only when she was already too deep? By dawn, she made a decision. She returned to the school. The parking lot was empty. The building was closed for a weekend maintenance shutdown, something that had suddenly been announced across the school's parent message board the night before. Rachel had seen the update just after that anonymous text came in. The timing wasn't coincidence. She climbed over the back fence and slipped through the same window she and Lucas used to sneak out of during recess years ago. The halls were darker than she remembered. Colder. It was like the building had exhaled all its warmth, waiting for her. She moved quickly but quietly, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a scream. She knew where she needed to go, the west wing. The hatch. When she got there, her stomach dropped. The hatch was open. Fresh air drifted up from below, but it wasn't the comforting kind. It smelled of earth, mold, and something metallic, like rust or old blood. And at the top of the ladder stood a man she hadn't seen in over a year. Sheriff Daniels. He turned slowly, as if he'd been expecting her. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. You weren't supposed to come back here, he said, his voice flat. We gave you a chance to walk away. Rachel stared at him, stunned. This was the same sheriff who told her family the investigation had hit a dead end. The same man who stood beside them during vigils, who had promised to do everything in his power to bring Lucas home. You knew? She asked, her voice barely audible. You knew about the hatch? Daniels exhaled, stepped away from the opening, and nodded. I knew before Lucas disappeared. Before Amy. Before any of them. This town's been covering up the truth for generations. The thing under this school, it doesn't kill. Not the way you think. It bargains. It offers something in return for obedience. For silence. And if we honor our side of the deal, it leaves us alone. Rachel took a step back. Her chest tightened. So, you let it take kids? Daniels looked at her with a strange mix of pity and resolve. It doesn't take anyone who doesn't open the door first. That's the rule. It calls, and some people answer. We tried sealing it off. Tried burning it. Every time it came back. The only way to contain it is to manage the pattern. Lucas found it on his own, but someone pushed him closer. He wasn't supposed to open it. We'd been watching him. Rachel's hands balled into fists. Who pushed him? That's when another voice answered from behind her. I did. She turned around and saw Mrs. Everly, Lucas's old third-grade teacher, standing in the hallway, calm and composed, holding a flashlight in one hand and a keychain in the other. He was special, she said softly. He heard the door years before he ever saw it. Kids like him, they have something the rest of us don't. And the thing below knows it. It wants that kind of mind. Rachel's vision blurred. This was the woman who had cried at Lucas's memorial, who had hugged his mother while she collapsed. She stepped forward, fury rising. You used him. Mrs. Everly didn't flinch. We guided him. That's different. We gave him a choice. And he made it. Sheriff Daniels reached for a tablet he had tucked under his arm and tapped the screen. A feed appeared. Grainy live footage from underground. The camera angle showed a tunnel-like corridor made of old stone, flickering with dim red lights. And at the end of it, Rachel's breath caught, was Lucas.
Alive.
Or something that used to be him. He was standing upright, staring directly into the camera, his face pale, eyes almost glowing. Not scared, not confused, just waiting. You see now, Daniels said. He didn't die. He changed. He opened the door and became part of it. We don't understand how, but once you open the hatch, you're not the same anymore. And now, it's your turn to decide. Walk away, or join the others who've chosen to carry the truth. But if you dig further, Rachel, there's no coming back. Mrs. Everly stepped forward and placed a small slip of paper in Rachel's hand. It had coordinates somewhere in the woods outside town. A second site. You'll find what you need there. If you're brave enough. Rachel stared at it, heart pounding. Every part of her screamed to run. But one thing kept her rooted. Lucas's eyes. He hadn't spoken, hadn't moved. But in that flicker of a live feed, she saw something familiar. Something real. He was waiting for her. She turned toward the hatch and gripped the edge. If you're not coming with me, she said without looking back, don't try to stop me. And then she climbed down, unaware that someone else, someone she had never suspected, was already below, waiting in the dark, with the door wide open. Rachel's descent into the hatch was slower than she expected, not because of the ladder's length, but because of what she was carrying inside her. Fear, adrenaline, rage, and something colder, resolve. The shaft opened into a narrow tunnel, its stone walls wet with condensation and lined with strange etchings that pulsed faintly in the dark, like veins under skin. The silence was alive. Each breath echoed as if it didn't belong solely to her. She moved forward, flashlight beams shaking as it cut through the black, until the tunnel opened into a larger chamber carved out of raw earth. That's when she saw him. Lucas. Or the boy who used to be her brother. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by concentric rings of symbols drawn in chalk and ash. His face was still his, but older, wearier. His eyes flickered between recognition and something ancient. Rachel took a step closer. Lucas, it's me. For a second, nothing. And then he blinked and smiled, soft and tragic. You shouldn't have come, Ratch. Behind him, embedded in the wall, was a door. Not the metal hatch from above, but something organic, massive and pulsing, like a membrane stitched into the cavern itself. It gave off a low hum, like a heartbeat. She could feel it vibrating in her chest. Lucas glanced back at it, then toward her. It's been waiting for you too. Rachel's flashlight began to flicker, and with it, her memory, sharp, vivid flashes of the past she had forgotten. The drawings Lucas used to make. The night terrors. The whispers he claimed to hear in class. All dismissed by adults as anxiety, imagination. But they were warnings. He had been trying to communicate what the rest of them couldn't see. What he had already seen. She dropped to her knees beside him, reaching into her backpack and pulling out the photo from Principal Harris's office, the one with the 7 children. She placed it between them. You're not the only one it took. Lucas nodded. They all opened it too. Some came back. Most didn't. From the shadows beyond the membrane door, movement stirred. Rachel whipped her light around and caught the edge of a figure stepping forward. It was Mrs. Everly, but not as she had appeared in the school hallway. Her eyes were black as coal, skin almost translucent, and her hands, longer, unnatural. Something beneath her skin shifted, crawling just under the surface like it wasn't entirely hers. "You made it," she said, her voice layered, as if someone or something else was speaking through her. Rachel rose to her feet, trembling. "What is this? What are you?" "We are the gatekeepers," Mrs. Everly said, tilting her head. "We maintain the balance between what is allowed to enter and what must stay buried. And you, Rachel, were always meant to choose." Behind her, a second figure emerged. Aaron. His face was grim, ashamed, but resolute. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said. "But they promised they wouldn't hurt you if I helped them. I tried to steer you away. You kept digging." Rachel staggered back, betrayal flooding her like ice water. "You used me." "I saved you," he shot back. "You have no idea what's on the other side of that door. What it offers. Knowledge.
Time.
Power. But every door needs a key. And every key requires a sacrifice." Lucas stepped between them now, his voice quieter. "That's what they don't tell you. The thing behind the door, it lies. It doesn't give anything. It feeds." Rachel's thoughts spun wildly, heart racing. This was the moment. She could walk away, escape with her life, but leave the truth buried and countless others at risk. Or she could do what no one else had dared, try to destroy the door once and for all. She looked at Lucas. "Can it be closed?" He glanced down at the rings of symbols. "Only from inside." Her knees nearly gave. "You're not doing it alone." But Lucas just smiled again, a mix of warmth and sorrow. "You already did your part. You brought the truth. You remembered me." And before she could stop him, he stepped back into the inner circle. The chamber trembled. Mrs. Everly shrieked, a sound not of this world, and lunged forward, but Aaron grabbed her, holding her back as she thrashed in inhuman spasms. Rachel ran to the edge of the circle, screaming his name, but Lucas looked at her one last time, eyes full of the boy she once knew. "Tell them," he said. "Tell everyone." And then the ground beneath him cracked. The symbols lit up like fire. The door pulsed once, twice, and then folded inward with a deafening roar, like the world exhaling after centuries of silence. Light engulfed the chamber. Everything shook. And then, silence. Rachel woke hours later outside the school grounds, the sun rising on a strangely quiet morning. The building was intact, untouched, but something felt different. Lighter. The hatch was gone, as if it had never existed. She never saw Lucas again. No one ever spoke of the hatch. When she returned to confront Aaron, his apartment was empty, erased. No trace. Even Mrs. Everly was gone from the staff records, her name wiped from the school system. But then, a week later, she received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single drawing, crayon, simple, childlike. 7 kids standing in a circle. 1 boy in the middle. And beneath it, in shaky writing, "The door's not gone, just sleeping." And Rachel realized the story wasn't over. It was just waiting for the next one. The weeks that followed felt unreal, like Rachel was walking through a world slightly out of sync. The school reopened as if nothing had happened. The town returned to its routine rhythms, and not a single headline appeared about missing children, secret tunnels, or unexplainable symbols etched into stone. It was as if the hatch and everything tied to it had been scrubbed from reality, not just physically but in the memories of those who had once been closest to the truth. The parents of the children in the old photo, the ones who had gathered for vigils, who had cried to local news cameras for answers, no longer seemed to remember they ever had children at all. Rachel tried asking once gently during a visit to one of the homes. The woman who answered the door looked puzzled, then smiled sadly. "Sorry, dear. I think you've got the wrong address." That moment haunted her more than the hatch itself. Rachel kept to herself after that. She stopped trying to convince others, stopped chasing what felt like ghosts. Instead, she filled notebook after notebook with everything she could remember: dates, names, diagrams of the chamber below the school, detailed drawings of the symbols she'd seen glowing in the dark. Part of her believed it was futile. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, knew she wasn't writing for herself. She was recording it for the next person who might stumble across something strange. Someone who hears whispers in places where there should be silence. Someone whose sibling begins drawing circles they can't explain. She wasn't trying to be a hero anymore. She was just trying to leave breadcrumbs in case the door ever decided to call again. Lucas was gone. At least the version of him that she had grown up with. She had to believe, for her own sanity, that he was at peace, or, at the very least, that he had chosen his fate willingly. She never found his body. But every once in a while, she'd wake from dreams so vivid they felt like memories. Dreams of him walking beside her through forests she'd never seen, pointing at skies that shimmered with impossible colors. He never spoke in those dreams, but his presence always left her with a strange sense of calm. And on those mornings, when she'd sit up, heart still racing, she'd glance at her window and swear she saw chalk markings on the pavement outside.
Faint.
Fading, but always in the shape of a circle. Aaron's betrayal left a scar that would never fully heal. But Rachel stopped hating him. Over time, she understood that people, even those closest to you, aren't always strong enough to fight the things they're afraid of. She'd read his final journal, the one he'd left behind in a safety deposit box she found months later, and it painted a picture of a man who had once tried to protect the truth before it broke him. In his last entry, he wrote something that stayed with her. Sometimes the truth is too heavy for one person to carry. But if we pretend it doesn't exist, it will crush someone else. That became her reason to keep going. The town itself changed in subtle ways. A new principal arrived, younger, energetic, eager to connect with students. The west wing of the school was permanently closed for renovation, though no construction ever took place. The janitor who first discovered the hatch took early retirement and moved away without a word. Occasionally, online forums in fringe communities would reference strange happenings in the town, threads that always got taken down within hours. But Rachel saw them, and sometimes she posted in them anonymously, never revealing her identity, only guiding others with quiet, coded advice that could help them survive whatever doors they might find in their own corners of the world. Years later, on the anniversary of Lucas's disappearance, Rachel returned to the woods behind the school, not to find anything, but to leave something behind. A wooden box, sealed and waterproof, filled with her journals, maps, and one small flashlight. She buried it at the coordinates from Mrs. Everly's note, deep under the roots of an old pine tree marked with a carved circle. She didn't do it for closure. She did it because she knew one day someone else would start asking the same questions. And when they did, they deserved more than silence. Rachel never spoke about what happened publicly. No interviews, no blog posts, no viral videos. But the experience changed her forever. She studied psychology, specializing in trauma and memory, and eventually became a counselor for at-risk youth. Kids who saw what others refused to. Kids like Lucas. And while she never told them the full truth, she always listened, really listened, because she understood that sometimes the wild, unexplainable stories children tell aren't fiction. Sometimes they're warnings, pieces of a much larger, much darker truth we've all been taught to forget. But every so often, when the wind picked up just right and the leaves rustled in patterns that seemed intentional, Rachel would pause and listen. Not with fear anymore, but with respect. Because while the hatch may have closed and the door sealed itself behind layers of stone and time, the thing on the other side hadn't disappeared. It was still out there, waiting, watching, and it remembered her name,